Welcome, everyone. Today we are tackling a pretty huge topic, one that can feel, well, a little intimidating: philosophy. But what if I told you it all kind of boils down to just 4 big questions? Let's jump right in.
Whoa, hold on. Before we get too deep, I have a genuine question. My dog, his name's Bartholomew, spends like hours just staring at a wall. You can tell he's deep in thought. So, Alex, is my dog a philosopher? You know, that's a fantastic question, Ben. And honestly, while Bartholomew sounds like a very profound pup, philosophy isn't just about random thoughts, no matter how deep. It's actually a system, a structured way of organizing the biggest questions we can possibly ask about reality, about knowledge, and about life itself. So, we're going to start with the first major branch, and it asks maybe the biggest question of them all: metaphysics. Its entire goal is to try and figure out what is actually truly real.
Yeah, metaphysics really tries to get at the fundamental building blocks of, well, everything. We're talking about existence itself, what makes a thing, the nature of time and space, all the really heavy-hitting stuff.
Right, okay. So are we talking about the massive, universe-level question of why is there something instead of just nothing? Or is it more about trying to figure out if this coffee cup in my hand really exists when I'm not looking at it? Because, one of those feels a little easier to wrap my head around.
It's both, actually. And you just hit on a huge debate in metaphysics. Let's go back to your dog, Bartholomew. He is what we'd call a particular. He's one specific individual dog. But what about the universal idea of dogginess, the qualities that all dogs share? Is that concept a real thing? And if so, where does it exist? See? That's metaphysics for you.
All right, so if metaphysics asks what is real, then the next obvious question has to be, okay, but how do we know what's real? And that brings us perfectly to our second branch, epistemology. Epistemology is basically the theory of knowledge. It doesn't just take for granted that we know things, it puts the entire idea of knowing under a microscope to figure out how it works and what its limits are. Okay, wait a second. Is knowing how to do a skill, like riding a bike, which feels like it's all in your body and your muscles, is that the same philosophical kind of knowing as knowing a fact, like that Princess Diana passed away in 1997? Because one feels totally physical, and the other is just in my head.
That's an excellent question, Ben, and it points right to the heart of a massive debate in this field. It's basically a conflict between 2 camps. You've got the empiricists, who say all knowledge has to come from our senses and experiences, and then you have the rationalists, who argue that no, some knowledge is just innate. We're born with certain truths already inside us.
So, we've talked about what's real and how we can know it. Now, let's turn to the branch that guides what we do about it all: ethics. The central question here is simple but huge. What is the right thing to do? Ethics, or moral philosophy, is all about building a framework for our actions. And it's not just for those giant society-level problems. It's also for helping each of us figure out how to live a good, meaningful life day to day. So this is where we get into those really tricky questions we all bump into, right? Like, what's more important? Making sure people are happy and their well-being is high, or fulfilling a specific duty or obligation you have, even if it makes someone unhappy? Man, there is no easy answer for that one.
Exactly. And philosophers have come up with different toolkits to help us think it through. So for example, consequentialists would say, hey, the outcome is all that matters. But deontologists would argue, nope, you have to follow your moral duties, no matter what happens. And then virtue ethicists come in and say, let's focus on the character of the person who's acting. It's 3 totally different ways of looking at the very same problem.
Okay, so we've got all these big ideas floating around about reality, knowledge, and morality, but how do we even talk about them or argue about them in a way that makes sense? Well, that's where our final core branch comes in. It's logic, the toolkit for thinking clearly. The thing about logic is, it's not really about the topic you're discussing. It's about the structure of your argument. It's meant to give us clear rules of the road so we can tell if our reasoning is solid or if it's just going to fall apart. Here's a super clean example of a valid argument. It's called modus ponens. Premise 1, today is Sunday. Premise 2, if today is Sunday, I don't go to work. The conclusion has to be, therefore, I don't go to work. See how clean that is? If the first 2 parts are true, the conclusion is guaranteed. That's good reasoning. Ooh, I got this. Let me try. Okay, premise 1, all birds can fly. Premise 2, a penguin is a bird. Therefore, penguins can fly to the moon. How'd I do?
Is that logic? I think that's logic.
You have just given us a perfect demonstration of something called a fallacy. Your very first premise that all birds can fly is just not true. And because it's false, the whole argument becomes unsound. And well, the flying to the moon part, that was a bit of a creative leap. A fallacy is just that, an error in reasoning that makes an argument go wrong.
All right, that was a whirlwind tour. We've touched on metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and logic. So let's try to pull this all together.
Okay. I think I'm getting it. This whole philosophy thing, it isn't just one giant, scary, impossible to understand subject. It's more like a set of different toolkits, and each tool is designed to help you think more clearly about a different kind of big question.
That is the absolute perfect way to put it. It really does come down to these four questions. Metaphysics asks, what's real? Epistemology asks, how do we know? Ethics asks, what's the right thing to do? And logic asks, does this argument even make sense? And so we'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. As you look at these four big questions, which one of them feels the most pressing, the most important in your life right now? Whatever your answer is, well, that's your starting point into philosophy.